You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
من هناك لشوارزنيجر
pegarle Ronaldinho Gaucho. Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! 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 ¡Golazo!
This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio, your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory, with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
Good day, good night, and welcome to Soccer Today. Duane, how was your Saturday morning?
My Saturday morning was stressful at times, but we got through it, and all is good there. Lots happened since then. It was a busy week in the world of soccer, and I had a Ligue 1 game as well, so I was watching a lot of it throughout the whole weekend. But certainly, that's the focal point for most of the world, I would have to say, was that game, and it lived up to it for once. The last two derbies were pretty bad. Yesterday, I thought was pretty good.
Pep versus Marino actually lived up to expectation in the first Manchester derby of the season last Saturday. 2-1 victory at the Theatre of Dreams for Manchester City on the road. 3 points. They got United is the first of the big three to draw points, and then on Saturday, Chelsea, a 2-2 draw. That's for the ages. A Diego Costa performance. Well, it cost a performance, you could say, where yellow cards, diving, and goals. So basically, a good day for Sunday as well.
Costa hat trick.
Costa hat trick. The yellow, the fouls, and the goals.
There you go. Costa is a fascinating creature. I've watched him because I have a bit of a soft spot for Atletico Madrid, as some people know. I wouldn't say that I support them, but I watch them more than any other team down there, and have since I traveled to Madrid back 7-8 years ago. So I watched him with them and sort of had a soft spot for him then. But he's one of those players that you love to hate or you hate to love.
You like to have on your team. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one thing the commentator said on Sunday was like, it's weird because sometimes Diego Costa can have the entire team on his back and he doesn't fall. And sometimes he could barely touch and he just flies away 20 feet away.
Yeah. Well, that's funny how that happens.
Yeah, it's funny.
Well, it's saying, look, and I mean, there's a certain stereotype about how you play the game in certain parts of the world, and it's a stereotype, and that's unfair in some cases. But certainly, he lives up to some of those stereotypes. How's that to say? Is that a polite way to say it? I think he
dies a lot. That's the way to put it. But let's go back to the Manchester derby for a second. It's an early one of the season in the Premier League. It was the first big game of the calendar for the big clubs. It lived up to expectation. It was an actual very entertaining game to watch. Where does it leave City? Where does it leave the top three? Because there was three teams undefeated with the big powers. We're talking about the two Manchester clubs and Chelsea. Where does it leave the top three now after the big first weekend of the season?
Well, I think both literally and figuratively, City to me, and we all know my bias. I'm going to stop saying it eventually because I say it every time just to put it out there. But to me, taking a step back and trying to objectively look at this, both literally and figuratively, City is the top of the table right now, in my opinion. I think that the way that, especially in the first half of the derby, they really controlled things, and they played such a crisp, controlled, precise game that it was difficult to see how United could come back from that. There was, the first 10 minutes of the second half, certainly United did make it a contest, and the second half in general was quite competitive. But even that said, Fernando came in, and sort of solidified the midfield for City after the changes Mourinho made at half. I think that it came back to, at the very worst, even. And this is, as you said, it's the game at Old Trafford. So for City to come out of that with a 2-1 win, undefeated off 4 games. He's got a big Champions League contest coming up. They're flying high right now after a pretty frustrating season. I think that the biggest, so to put it as simply as possible, what makes this, I think, what should make this scary for the rest of the league is the fact that City did it without Aguero too.
Yeah.
And that's a major talking point on that.
No, absolutely. And when you're looking at we'll go quickly through the games on Saturday. 2-1 City at Old Trafford. Arsenal 2, Southampton 1, Bournemouth 1, West Bromwich Albion 0. Burnley 1, Hull 1. Surprising result continuing for Hull. A point on the road is always useful. Middlesbrough 1, lost to Crystal Palace at home, 2-1 Crystal Palace. Stoke City got destroyed by Tottenham. 4-0 Tottenham on the road at the Britannia to get that victory. West Ham United 2, the Hammers at their new Olympic Stadium lost to Watford 4-2. And Liverpool destroyed the darling of the world of soccer 4-1 against Leicester on Saturday, which was a little bit of a surprise, but Leicester's going to have to battle on two fronts, and maybe this is the first occasion of them choosing maybe Champions League setup over the Premier League this weekend around.
Yeah, maybe. I think it is telling. Look, I didn't expect Leicester to be up the top again. I don't think many people did. I didn't think they were going to fall off a cliff either. They do have more money behind them than people think. They were legitimate champions last year, but that certainly was the other talking point of the weekend was the Liverpool-Leicester game and the dominant, well, two things. I mean, Lucas's play at the end there with the pass to no one, and then the goal, which it's not an own goal, but it might as well have been for Leicester's only goal of the game, was certainly the hilarity talking point of the game. But nonetheless, when you score for yourself, that's going to be supersede all that sort of nonsense. But also the opening of the new stand. The expansion of the original stand is what it was. There's still some seats in that stand from the 1800s, so it's hardly new, but nonetheless a much bigger and impressive site. Anfield now, I think that's an important evolution for the club, and a glorious old club with a lot of history. Obviously, that's maybe not been as successful as it would have liked since it maybe had that little blip in 06. To me, it's a vital thing. They bring Klopp in, they get us a vision going forward. They get some more revenue coming in with the increased stands, which is not really the most exciting thing for sports fans to talk about, but it's important in this particular environment. And I think Liverpool's a team to watch out for in about another year when Klopp could fully put his mark on the club. Right now, I think defensively, there's still a little bit too much liabilities at the back for Liverpool just yet for them to completely take that step. But certainly, I would put them in the mix for that top four this year. As I said, I think the top three is going to pretty much go where it is right now. And in terms of Leicester, I mean, we're talking about September here, and I'm already declaring the stuff 16. Over. But that's, nonetheless, is kind of how this league works. Leicester is, they're going to be battling for, I said this off the top in the preview, they're going to be battling for a Europa spot. They're not going to fall off a cliff, but they're certainly not going to be, I think, even close to a Champions League spot. Like, they're more hoping for, 7 spots to open up and grab one of those 7th European spots. If they want that, the Europa League spot at all, that is, of course. I'll be very curious to see how they do in the Champions League. That's a lot of people are going to be tuning into that to watch that out, play out, Kevin. But I didn't really get your take on the Manchester derby. Obviously, I have, a partisanship with there, and so it's hard for me to truly separate myself from that in these cases. But, again, I thought that City was pretty dominant in the first half. I thought the second half was pretty even. The midfield battle was an interesting one. That's really what the difference was in the first half, when the way that the United lined up was just allowing City to sort of, there's just too much space, basically. And Pogba's not exactly a defensive wizard in the first place. And
did you see the stats there? Did you see the stat that went around the league yesterday, saying since Pogba joined Manchester United, 8 haircuts, 100 million. A lot of different things, but 0 shot on targets, 0 goals, 0 assists. 100 million.
Yeah, he's a talent. He'll be fine. But
just to go back to what I thought about that derby, Duane, Manchester United is the type of thing that we expected them to be very good against lower type of teams. And these Zlatan Ibrahimovic of this world are known to score a lot of goals against smaller team, and that's how Man United usually wins their league titles. Is you get 3 points against everybody else and just try to survive against the top 3, and that is what United season is going to look like for them. They're going to get great results against 16, 17 teams in that league, but the top 3, top 2, the Manchester, the other derby, the Chelsea, it's going to be tough for them to get the results with the squad they do have compared to the top ones. There is a drop off from Pogba to Ibrahimovic, and going down the roster. So that's going to be intriguing to me to see how United's going to fare against a top club, because they're going to get the points against the Swanseas and the Bournemouth, Burnleys, Leicester, West Ham, but it's against City, against Chelsea. Those points are going to be determined where they're going to finish at the table.
Yeah. Well, no, obviously. And you're right to say that 3 points is 3 points is 3 points. And I think that that's something that people fail to realize a lot of times, especially, not just against the small clubs, but, 3 points in August is the same as 3 points in May. And I've never really understood this idea that games can be more important at the end of the season. They seem more important because everything's a little more intense then. But nonetheless, the 3 points is 3 points.
To finish on the Premier League for the first block, we'll talk about MLS in the second block, Duane. There's a Monday Night Football today. It's the David Moyes return to Everton as the coach of Sunderland. The David Moyes Derby. Anything in that game that attracts your attention? Do you think David Moyes is going to have maybe success with his new team to go back to Everton, where he became a good manager, where he bloomed as a manager a few years ago before the United debacle? Anything in that game today that's actually exciting, or it's just a boring Monday Night Football game?
Well, Everton's they're in their good year. They're the every other team. They're kind of the current every other year team in the Premier League, where they have crap seasons, then good seasons, then crap seasons, then good seasons. So they're on their cycle to have a good season. And I've always felt that Everton a little thin in depth. That's always been their issue. And certainly selling Stones didn't help them too much, although it did add some money to the coffers they didn't really use, which has kind of been their problem too. But nonetheless, that's I think it's a good team is what I'm saying, and they can be competitive in that upper mid area. Sunderland is kind of like the cockroach of the Premier League, so they have some fascination that way. But in terms of Moyes coming back, he was a guy that never should have left Everton. He could have been a club legend, manager for life there. I understand sort of the instinct to chase that big stick. That big carrot, I should say, which ended up being a stick, and get that. But he's got to have some regret. And I would imagine walking back in there, and he's managed against already. He did with United. But I would imagine walking back into that stadium has some very bittersweet memories for him, because, as I said, he has to recognize that he had a damn good thing going there.
Why did I go to United? Why did Sir Alex Ferguson choose me? Why did I go there? Then why did I go to Italy, of all places?
Well, I'm not ever Spain. It was, but I'm not going to blame him for that. I think that more guys from that part of the world should be testing themselves outside of that part of the world. That's kind of been a fault in the past, and I think that's one of the reasons I really like Joe Hart going to Torino.
You mean John? John Hart? Because Torino can't spell, apparently.
That's fine.
Poor Joe. Oh, poor Joe. Duane, let's take a quick break and come back and talk about some Landon Mania. And we're back. No bumpers. A little technical issue here, but we're back, Duane. Let's talk about Landon Donovan. He made his debut-ish with the Galaxy, but between you and me, that's 4-2, 4-1, 4-2 finish? 4-2 Orlando. Yeah. It was an impressive victory for Orlando, for Galaxy, against Orlando. It had nothing to do with Donovan.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, did I see the wrong game? No, it was the Galaxy got out to the big lead early, and quickly on Orlando, because obviously we want to talk about Donovan and all that. Really, what this team has been, the Lions all year, is exactly what we saw in play there. They managed to get 2 goals. They were impressive going forward at times, but God, they're bad at the back. They're horrific. They're kind of TFC last year in a lot of ways, in the sense that they can score but they can't defend. That's never really going to get you too far, as here in Toronto we can tell you. But at any rate, so they added a little to the occasion by getting a couple goals. But by and large, this was the LA Galaxy show, and more to me about Bruce Arena getting his veteran guys kind of chugging along. They're like that big boulder that he pushes slowly up a hill, and then at the end of the year in September, he gives it that one last little push and watches it roll faster and faster down the other side of the mountain. And that's kind of what makes me think that was most impressive about that game. Obviously, Donovan is the storyline, though. And as you said, look, we all tuned in and we all watched it, and we all stood and watched the standing ovation as he came in. Maybe not all of us were clapping. Most of the people in the United States were, of course. Landon Donovan is a legend there, and he is revered. It's funny, actually, a quick aside on that, Kevin. I've been listening to a lot of takes on him since he came back. And universally, it is, I've heard about 3 or 4 people issue kind of hesitations on it that are like, but. And then 98 people are like, wee! And 2 of the 3 that I've heard that were kind of hesitation were both Canadians. And then the third was someone from Seattle who's a Sounders fan. So that's sort of speaking, they don't like Galaxy. So there you go.
That's exactly what I was thinking too. When you're looking at because now there's people talking about, will he be included in U.S. men's national team for the qualification process? No, he's here on a temporary basis. And if you can read between the line, it's probably going to be just for the next 3 months, just to get that push, to get that confidence. And when I looked at how the Galaxy played, even though he was on the bench for the majority of the game and just came in late, they had a little confidence, a little swagger that they were missing. Yeah, you had Robbie Keane coming back from injury. You had other players stepping up. Alan Gordon with his 50th MLS goal. By the way, a little nod to Bobby Boswell. 350 MLS appearances for many, many different teams, yes. And could have been with Montreal, but we all remember what happened in 2012. So, but good for Bobby Boswell. But for Alan Gordon, 50 goals, the way he was set up, and it actually felt like the Galaxy of old. And you know what note I wrote? I wrote Galaxy time, because that's what it feels like. This game was the beginning of Galaxy time.
Yeah. I mean, they're probably going to go in. They're going to have to play one of those play-in games. So I would think that if you're the rest of the league, you're going to be cheering pretty hard for whoever draws the Galaxy in that game, because if you can't sort of nick them in that one-off, then they're going to be a very tough team to beat over 2 legs with the amount of veteran presence that they have there. And I would include both Colorado and Dallas as being teams that are going to struggle, especially Colorado. I mean, I still don't quite know what to make of them. Of course, they got the big win this weekend, but maybe we'll talk about that in a minute. But
we'll keep the Canadian team for the Canadian review later on. But if we go just quickly on the result in the weekend in MLS, Friday, we had that Sporting Kansas City Houston game, and Kansas City were able to get that late draw at home. Houston and Sporting Kansas City, it's drop points for Kansas City. Yes, Houston is the bottom dwellers of the Western Conference, but a 3-3 game that was very entertaining, to say the least.
Oh, yeah, MLS can have its moments, right? Lots of storylines this weekend, lots of late goals, lots of results that maybe went against teams chasing playoff spots. There's a great article out there by Total MLS that sort of breaks down statistically all of the playoff races if you're in kind of that. And it's very difficult to sort of simply put it out there. But by and large, what this article sort of articulated was that the races are almost too close. That even Columbus can technically still win the East. Now, technically, it's a very strong word in this case, but they'd have to win out and have a lot of other weird results happen. But nonetheless, statistically speaking, every team is still in the race there. And MLS loves that, of course. They love the parity. I'm not as big of a fan of it, but nonetheless, it's there. Look, we'll talk about those Canadian results, which have a huge impact, and I have lots to say about TFC in the final block. But nonetheless, as you said, everything got tighter this weekend, and that's if you like a race, if you like that. We didn't have last year. They have that. They finally got their crap together and decided to have all the games kick off at the same time last year. This year, they're going to take it even one step further and have all the games league-wide kick off at the same time rather than East versus West. So the Superior Shield race will be in the mix as well. But we didn't really have much last year. There wasn't a lot of playoff races, like TFC, for instance. It's the 6th seed in the East. They're playing Montreal that final weekend. They needed to win to get 5th, I believe is how that worked. If memory serves, didn't happen. But by and large, like I said, that there wasn't much going on in the final weekend last year. But it looks like this weekend there will still be a lot at play. That the red lines will still be in play, and certainly the buys will still be in play. So that's exactly what they want for that sort of frantic final day on TV where they jump from game to game and it sort of looks like a March Madness kind of thing. That's the model that they want, and I think that's the model they're going to get this year. And I can't deny that won't be exciting. So so we'll enjoy that when it comes, Kevin.
New England 3, New York City FC 1. New England helped a lot of teams in the Eastern Conference by winning against NYCFC to close the gap with the Red Bull and New York and give a chance to Montreal and other teams in the Eastern Conference to not bridge the gap, no, but at least not let that gap become too big, too wide. So New England 3, New York City FC 1, Chicago 1, Toronto FC 2. Big victory on the road against Chicago. It was a tricky game because Chicago is actually playing a lot better than the standings would suggest, and are actually trying to play spoilers in this last third of the season in Major League Soccer.
Yeah, we'll talk in detail about that in the Canadian Review, but it was the first time in Toronto FC history they've ever won in Chicago. Which is significant. Although it's funny, the record in Chicago is now 1-5-5. So they've had 5 draws, lost 5 times and 5 draws there. So it's a weird amount of. They weren't like exactly getting killed in Chicago, so it never felt like one of those stadiums that they struggled in. But in fact, that was the last stadium outside of the expansion teams because they haven't beat NYCFC either. But outside of that, this is the last of the stadiums to fall for TFC. They finally have a win at Chicago.
Yeah, no, it was a very interesting matchup. And we talked about Colorado. They won on the road against Dallas, a very important result in the standing in the Western Conference. Colorado won at Dallas 0.
Yeah, well, that's how Colorado is going to have to win its games, 1-0. I still don't believe Colorado. I believe they're a playoff team. I don't believe they're a championship team. I've expressed why before, but if you're new, it's because they don't score enough. And the old adage about defense winning championships simply doesn't hold up when you look at statistically speaking over the years. It's offense wins championship in Major League Soccer. And if you don't believe me, go run the numbers yourself. They're right there. The team that has scored the most goals is far more likely to win a title in MLS than the team that allows
it will win the MLS Cup 1-0. Yes, there's not going to be a lot of goals scored in the actual MLS Cup. But the lead up to it, yeah, it's the team that usually scores the most.
You need to score. So Colorado, but nonetheless, they're there, and they did a big favor in the Shield race. The Shield race is now back on. Had Dallas won that game, the Shield race would have been over. Is basically what it comes down to. So that was useful that way, Kevin.
No, exactly. All right, just to finish the games of the weekend, Portland 1, Real Salt Lake 0. And one tidbit of information about Portland, they've sell out a lot of games in a row in Portland.
Yeah, we might talk about that a bit more in the next block, but certainly that was a historic game in terms of their numbers, and they had a big sellout the next day as well for the Thorns, the NWSL team, and I'm looking to book a guest this week to talk about the NWSL as it breaks into its playoff season. Don't worry, women's fans out there, we will provide that coverage in the days ahead. So looking to get an expert in to do that because there's only so many hours in the day. And I do watch a lot of women's football, but I can't watch the NWSL at the same level as I would like to, as I feel comfortable talking about in detail in this show. So we'll get an expert in to talk about that. But like I said, back-to-back sellouts and back-to-back days certainly is impressive for Portland. Soccer City USA is, to use the term that apparently their owner doesn't like, but nonetheless, that a lot of people have put on Portland for over the years.
Exactly. No, so it's a 1-0 victory for Portland against Real Salt Lake. A very important victory for Portland in the standings. Real Salt Lake was battling and making a climb to the top, and that victory and that clean sheet gives Portland an edge against their Cascadia rivals for the famous 6th spot that gives a spot to the playoffs.
Yeah. 2 of the 3 Cascadia teams are likely going to miss. So Portland wants to get in there and defend its title, and I think right now, with the mystery about Dempsey, that Portland probably is the best of the 3 Cascadia teams. Vancouver got some results this weekend, but nonetheless, I think we've talked them to death in recent days. So I'll leave that well enough alone. But the sort of the crawl race, instead of a sprinting race, so it's a crawling race in Cascadia this year. But I think Portland might be the turtle that gets to the line first.
Yeah, it makes sense when you're looking at the standings as well. All right, let's finish the score. 1-1 San Jose in Seattle. A great free kick goal by Lodero that went untouched, crossed the whole entire box, bounced twice, and finished at the end of the back of the net for a 1-1 draw between San Jose and Seattle at Avaya Stadium.
That sound you're hearing are weeping Seattle fans as their playoff hopes went up in smoke, in my opinion.
Oh, I thought it was just background noise.
Yeah. Seattle's it'll be very interesting to see that market. And I know we have Seattle listeners, so I'm not trying to bash you when I say this, but you must admit that adversity is not something that you have ever had with that club. So if you do miss the playoffs this year, I think there will be some people in your fan base that are a little more, shall we say, casual, that may in fact decry it as the end of the world. But one playoff miss in the amount of seasons you've been, what is it, 8 seasons? The 8th season for them this year?
Yeah, it's the 8th season. Yeah, 2009, 10.
Yeah, that's not a bad record. So you can enjoy that. But nonetheless, it's I think that draw pretty much was, if not the final nail, the hammer is now cocked and ready to come down.
No, absolutely, Duane. And when you look at Sunday's game, we talked about the 4-2 victory of the Galaxy. But another game that were important in the Eastern Conference, the Red Bulls 2, DC United 2. DC United keeps their playoff hopes not just alive, but they're in the thick of things with that draw, the 1 point, just like Montreal got on Saturday. They keep in the conversation, but it actually helped the team at the top of the East as well by keeping the Red Bulls to only 1 point. The 2 New York teams dropped point this weekend and let the stage open for maybe a Toronto push with their best points per game average in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, best points per game, period, in each conference right now. Hello, Tobias, my old friend, when it comes down to the New York game too, and we'll talk maybe about that in the next block as well. But a late goal by DC sort of kept everything at play there and allowed the East to get tighter, because no one really outside of Toronto this weekend took control of their destiny, and it makes for, as I said earlier, a very interesting sprint. One final thought on Donovan, and someone else tweeted this. I can't remember who, so I'm not. This isn't my completely original thought, but I thought that it is not really much of a thought, to be honest, but it does really summarize what it is. It's like, my review on Donovan is thus: he looked like a guy that hadn't played in 2 years. So,
hey, guess what? He was a guy that hadn't played in 2 years.
Yeah, that's where we're at, and we'll see how this plays out. But certainly, as you said, psychologically speaking, might be the biggest influence Landon Donovan has.
He might be as non-important, or not important is probably not the right way to put it, but his influence in the locker room, he's like an extension of Bruce Arena. If there's anything brewing in there with content or people non-content, maybe that will help as well, this team gel, quote unquote.
Yeah. And look, they'll get him a goal. Don't worry about that, folks. They'll find a way to get him on the score sheet.
Well, you're going to have Giovanni Dos Santos crossing a ball like he did to Gordon, when it's going to be Donovan at the end. It's going to be just a tap in for goals. We've seen it twice in the game on Sunday. We're going to see that would happen with Donovan before the end of the season for sure.
Yeah, but we'll see. I mean, it's an interesting thought experiment. I can be a little cynical about it. I'm not an American fan, so I don't have that connection with Landon. So I don't have the same emotional reaction to it as an American U.S. fan would. But nonetheless, I can understand.
Well,
it.
You know what?
Interesting.
With Sunday, we saw that Landon is no Mario Lemieux. Not 2 goals and 1 assist in his comeback game.
Yeah, I think that was against the Leafs, so that's not really fair.
Well, yeah, true. I would have scored. All right, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we will be doing our MLS Bits and Bites.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
In the weekend, Duane, there was a newborn, the son of Dom Dwyer and Sidney Leroux. Cassius, future star player for probably the U.S. men's national team, but unfortunately not Canadian. But Duane, if you could decide, if you could pull the China in the early 80s, late 90s, who would you force to have a child together for the benefit of soccer?
Forced to have a child together is a little rapey, so we're not.
I don't want to say forcing the encounter, but if you had like some scientific lab, you know what I mean?
We're gonna play MLS Tinder. Is what we're gonna do here.
MLS Tinder. Do you swipe left or right for the type of person that would create the next future soccer star?
Yeah, I'm gonna go. Let me just think here. Obviously, I'm Canadian, so it's gonna have to be a Canadian. I know Sid Leroux has the connections there.
So Christine St. Clair.
No. I'm gonna go a little different. I mean, Sinclair's a pretty within the men's game, I don't know if Sinclair's game would exactly translate. Obviously an immensely talented player, but she's a very direct physical player.
Yeah, physical. You need somebody technical, right? The technical side of it.
And I hesitate because she's very young. But Jessie Fleming, once she becomes of appropriate age, I am going to start her in a very loving and
Alphonso Davies?
Innocent relationship.
Alphonso Davies and Jessica Fleming. Come on.
With let me think here for a second on the men's side of things. Although I don't want to be, I'm not trying to be heteronormative, but we do know how babies are made. Let's hook Jessie up with. I want to say like I'm trying. I want to keep it age appropriate as well too. But,
that's why I said Laren or Alphonso Davies, because it could be technically legal still.
Because I can't say D-Row. That's just wrong.
I was like DeVos because of the size. He's tall. That's going to be helpful. But nah.
It's a father of four, man. Come on, no. She's so technical on the ball that I think someone with a bit of scoring prowess would make Jessie Fleming's game powerful. Though she has 5 goals for UCLA now, so it's not like she can't score. But at the international level, she's not really a scorer. She's more playmaker. So I'm going to put her with the scorer, and I'm going to put her, I guess, with Laura. That would make the most sense.
No, exactly. So congratulations once again to Sid LaRue and Dom Dwyer on the birth of Cassius Dwyer LaRue, a future player for soccer.
Yes.
Has to be. Like, if he grows up and goes see his parents like, I want to play hockey. Yeah, that's not going to happen.
Well, not to put too fine of a point on it, but both parents are pretty good looking, so he could be a model too. So there you go.
That's a fair point. Very fair assessment. We touched it on the previous segment. The Timbers sold out 100 straight games at what used to be called the Gentleman Stadium a few years ago. What does that represent in Cascadia, in the lore of soccer in the United States and North America? 100 straight games sellout. Not even Seattle, Vancouver, any other team in the league can say that.
Yeah, is it Providence Park now? What's it called now? Do we know?
Is it Timbers Park? Or something like that?
I
think they just went back to the original name.
It tells you how much I pay attention to corporate sponsorship. Jellwyn would always amuse me because it sounded like
because it's windows and there was no window at all in the whole stadium.
Would also seem like a Star Wars character to me. Jellwyn. Anyway, back to your point though. I think that obviously it's an accomplishment, and certainly Portland is, as we witnessed by their amount of support for the women the next game. And to me, that's almost more impressive because it's one thing to get out with trendy MLS to actually get on the ground level and support your lower level teams or your women's teams. I'm not saying women's are lower, but you know what I mean? They don't get as much support in the media and things like that. So it's not as trendy to go support them is what I'm trying to say. So to also, get out there and do that too, to me, is telling about the amount of soccer fans in that market. So clearly it is a very good soccer market. In terms of the sellout record, I wouldn't put as much stock in it as they probably would be up there. Because as you said, you mentioned Seattle, you name dropped them. They haven't sold every game, but then again, they could put 60,000 in there some days.
So if you actually do a pro rata, we haven't done the stats, but if you bring it back to 30, they might have had more, or 25, or the equivalent size of stadium in the league. They would have a sellout streak. And just to go back to Dom Garber's comment on Friday's show, Duane, he mentioned Montreal like on Wednesday night there was 17,000 people, how the stadium was perfectly sized because you don't want the stadium to look empty. You want to have a number big enough that you can fill it on a constant basis, but not low enough that you're missing revenue, but not too much that you're actually costing revenue. So I think a 25,000 stadium size in the whole league for the whole season is a decent size. So when you have like a Timbers Park around 30, 35, depending on the setup, and you have other places in the league, some stadium actually hard to fill if you're looking at games midweek sometimes, but Portland doesn't have that trouble. That mailing list that they do have is quite extensive.
Yeah, and I'd be careful about expanding it too much. And their sight lines are tough to expand anyway, because it is, of course, a converted baseball field, right? So there's only so much footprint you can play around with there to get more seats in. But as you'd have a firsthand example there in Montreal, not in soccer, but in the other version of football, the CFL in this case, with the Alouettes.
Perfect example. They overextended too much, and then they stopped winning, and there's no sellout for the last few years now.
Yeah, and the atmosphere has dropped with it as well. That's the whole idea, to try and get those intimate stadiums. And we have seen that trend within Major League Soccer. That was my big fear with TFC, with the pretty rapid expansion from a stadium that was just a shade over 20,000 to a stadium that's 30,000. And they were doing this when the team was going backwards in terms of production as well and skill in the field. They got a little lucky with Jabinko, and they've done okay, but they're still not selling BMO out, right? 28,000 people in there pretty consistently, but that still means there's 2,000 empty seats. So there is something to be said about keeping scarcity at play. But then again, I have been in there the couple times that BMO has been sold out this year when it's packed, including that Montreal game, which was probably
the best experience at BMO Field since
in a long time, since the early days. When the stadium sat 21,000, I think it's what it sat back then, and it was packed in there.
Yeah, but with hindsight now, Duane, it's been what, 3 months? It's been open, 2 months, and you have about 10 games that were played there. The atmosphere and the actual what's it called, like roof or the stanchions up top that keeps the sound in. The canopy. Yeah, the canopy is the right word. It actually was really more real. I can't speak English today. It was more impressive than we thought. Like even I experienced it. I thought it was going to be just it's there. Like the Stade Saputo, it does keep the sound in, but the way it's built, the pitch, it goes out. For some reason, it was maybe thought better in Toronto. I don't know what the explanation is, but even though the canopy are really high, it does keep the atmosphere in that stadium more than we anticipated it.
What I'll tell you, the biggest difference I've experienced, I don't find it that much louder, but then again, I've always been where it's loudest anyway.
Well, yeah,
so
you're in the middle of it, so it's hard to look at that.
Certainly when they do the
famous Iceland that made its way around the world now,
yeah, which has become a BMO staple now, although we've been doing it slow cap at BMO since 2010 or so. But at any rate,
we can call this the Icelandic contribution to the world of football.
Yeah, and when that happens, certainly the echo around there, you can kind of tell. But to me, the biggest difference is kind of got a little off Portland's topic here. Congratulations on 100, guys. But to me, the biggest difference is visually almost. It's because the canopy's there. It seems like a smaller footprint now. It seems like you're inside something rather than just having this big space. Because especially before they built that second deck, it's that combined over 2 years. They built that second deck, the red wall, they like to call it, on the east side. Whereas before it was pretty. You used to see the skyline, like you'd see the CN Tower and the Sky Dome and all that sort of stuff. And it made for a nice visual. And there were a lot of out-of-town journalists that kind of missed that because it was like, they don't see it every day. I can look out my window right now and see the CN Tower. So it's not like I'm, gazing lovingly at it.
No, exactly. It's just some concrete and it's gray. There's some lights
that I literally see every day of my life. Now it's now that that's gone and you're all in there. Like I said, visually, there's something psychological about that visual sightline now that makes you feel like you're in a stadium. I was never one of these people that viewed BMO Field as anything more than pragmatic prior to the last couple of years. And I was not someone that was demanding that they change it into anything other than pragmatic. I was kind of happy with my little Lego set there, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. So that's our stadium talk. Before we finish our bits and bites, Bradley Wright Phillips has now statistically the best 3-year stretch in Major League Soccer history, scoring history especially. He's done it in a low profile because not 27 in one season, not records, but consistency has been the key for BWP in New Jersey. And I have to say, it's impressive when you look at it, his 3-year stretch. Now, when you're looking at who he played, the amount of changes, he went from Thierry Henry to Sacha Klista, and a lot of different team composition, different coaching staff. But there was one constant over the last 3 years is BWP put that ball in the back of the net.
Yeah, you remember his first year, his breakout season, 19 or 20 goals that year. Everyone sort of thought, but Henry's on there, and once he leaves, then it's going to go back to normal because there won't be that sort of threat, right? Like it's the old adage that you're over-covering the superstar and that the secondary guy is picking up the seconds, right? So that sort of has been proven to not be the case. I think it's interesting to me that the guy he passed, and this isn't exactly a record that people are, watching with bated breath, but nonetheless, the guy that he passed for the best 3-year stretch was Wondolowski, which is another kind of plumber in MLS standards. It's not going to get a lot of excitement around the world. But as our friend Duncan Fletcher likes to say, Bradley Wright Phillips is maybe the biggest thing that keeps Major League Soccer's reputation down in England, because he's like was just seen as a nothing player when he came over here. So he's absolutely revitalized his career, found a way to succeed over here. You know, a cynic of the league might say it's because the league is weak, but I think it's more a case of him finding some place where he's comfortable and is you know the man, and that's something you're going to find everywhere. But certainly a very impressive, consistent streak, and I suspect that this is a record that will fall next year to Giovinco unless Giovinco leaves. But then again, I think that when you look at the end of the day for both Giovinco and Bradley Wright Phillips' career numbers, I think that Giovinco will probably leave TFC after next season. So Bradley Wright Phillips will stick around and continue to score for probably 3, 4, 5 more years. So that's you know, the balance that you have to sort of look for within Major League Soccer is do you want a guy that comes in for 3 years and lights things up and you have a great party for those 3 years and then you have to figure out how to replace him, or do you want a guy that just sort of does a job for 7, 8, 9 years, which is better? And that's always the big question that you have to battle with in Major League Soccer when you're building a roster.
Yeah, sometimes not as much as a superstar, but can keep playing at a high level with your team for longer, maybe the way to go when you're looking at the BWP blueprint in New York compared to Piatti, Drogba, Giovinco, those type of players that, yes, are more short-term, 2, 3 years, 4 years max. When you have a player like BWP that you can squeeze results out of him for a longer period of time, it might be beneficial in the famous consistency, stability, which MLS Cup winners always have stability and consistency. So for Red Bulls, it's actually coming close, I think, with the performance of BWP and how their roster is going together. It was a little step out of the right road this week with a draw instead of a win, but still, you do have that consistency. But the Red Bulls dropped a lot of points over the last few weeks. If you look at it, they dropped 18 points, Duane, from winning position. Is that a worry for a Red Bulls fan?
Well, you'd have to think so. Yeah. They have the most points dropped from winning position, which is a bit of one of those weird stats because if you're dropping a lot of points from winning positions, it means also you're in winning of positions a lot. So you have to be somewhat talented to do that, but nonetheless, it sort of is problematic. The late goals, they are second worst in the league in terms of goals after 60 minutes behind Columbus. So there are some problems there. Just to finish the thought, as we wrap this block up on the Bradley Wright Phillips versus Giovinco, I sort of mentioned that before. I did want to go back into this. I think when you're talking about a guy like Giovinco, that obviously any team in the league would be happy to have him for 2, 3 years because obviously he's a different level. But there are guys that come over for a much shorter period of time that you can maybe have that debate with. And I just wanted to make that clear that I wasn't trying to argue that TFC should have got Bradley Wright Phillips instead of Giovinco. Giovinco's otherworldly and it may end up giving TFC an unheard of, unthought of, unbelievable trophy at some point because, you know, it's TFC for God's sakes.
All right, so on that note, on that sentence where you use the word trophy and TFC in the same one, which actually feels really weird, we'll take a little longer break and come back with the Canadian Review. You're listening to Soccer Today on SPN Radio. You can find the on-demand version of this very show on iTunes, Stitcher, Feedburner, Podbay Player, Podbean, anywhere you get your podcasts under the Sports Podcasting Network feed. Subscribe to our YouTube page to make sure you never miss a live show talking about soccer today, the MLS postgame show, open lines after dark, 5 rings daily during the Olympics. Make sure you subscribe and give us a follow on Twitter at SportsPodNet and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. The Canadian Review on the Two Solitudes Soccer Podcast. Sweet sound of the Bare Naked Ladies, bringing us to the Canadian Review, Duane. 1-1 Montreal, 2-1 TFC, but Vancouver dropped some points once again.
Yeah, Vancouver is a mess. Look, there's not much more to say about the Whitecaps. I had a laugh.
Actually, it's 1-3-1. Sorry, it's the habit of talking about Vancouver. Actually got a great victory on the road at Columbus, which was a must-win if you go back to Friday's show.
Yeah, no, it's still, though, this week they had dropped points earlier, so that's sort of what we were talking about there. But, they did get the win for Columbus. But Then again, I think I covered a game between the Masters Football Academy and Von Azuri last night. I'm not sure that an all-star game between those two teams might have taken points off the Crew right now. So there you go. The Whitecaps, I had a bit of a laugh when I was watching a TSN promo this year. And they said the Whitecaps push the playoffs continues. I'm like, that's an awful funny push, like pushed off a cliff maybe. But at any rate,
push off that plank.
Yeah, they got 3 goals. They have beautiful goals too. So that's something they can build on for sure. They absolutely need to build on it though. They're in a position now where they have dug a hole that will require them to get on a crazy end of year streak. We've seen it in Major League Soccer before. We saw it with Portland last year, who were out of the playoffs in August and won the MLS Cup in December. So it's possible, but you need to be nearly perfect at this point. And that's the sort of like I said, that's the hole that they've dug. So it's up to them to dig themselves up, and they need to take care of the games that they're expected to take care of. And again,
but the one caveat with Vancouver, Duane, is you're looking at them right now, 7th position, 4 points behind Portland in 6th, with the last spot. It gives you a ticket to the playoffs. Vancouver has 34 points and have 29 game plays. Every team behind them has 27 games played. So they have 2 games in hand. And 2 of the 3 teams behind them are in striking distance with only 1 win to take in that 7th spot. Talk about San Jose and 33 points behind Vancouver, and Seattle 32 points. With 2 games in hand each, they have a better points per game average. And if you go with the our version how to calculate your games in hand, you take usually 50% of those points, or you just extrapolate with the points per game average, and then bring Vancouver theoretically in 9th position in the Western Conference, 4 points, but not a lot of opportunity to get those points versus Portland and Kansas City, because they're both equal in 5th and 6th possession.
What I do anyway is I just go 1.5. Like, if you have 3 games in hand, you can probably expect you're going to get 1.5 times 3 is what I anticipate out of that. So it's 3 points.
So Vancouver is in a pickle. They need to get a couple wins to reassure everybody, to make sure that there's not a drop off in the stands. I mean, because there's one in the standings, but in the stands, we're seeing the result of the team affect the amount of people going to see Vancouver games. So hopefully that doesn't continue to be the case. Other important games, including Canadian team this week, Duane. We talked about Montreal, their big defeat 4-1 at home Wednesday. It was a very bad performance. They rebounded kind of nicely on Saturday with a 1-1 draw in Philadelphia. They rescued the point at the 88th minute with Mateo Mancosu getting that equalizer. He had a lot of chances, a great start for him, took over for Didier Drogba as a starting striker for Montreal. They were set up differently, 6 changes for Montreal. One change that I alluded to earlier last week in my Off the Woodworks that I recorded last Thursday, I was expecting Patrice Bernier to start at the number 10 position. We saw more ball control, more easiness for him to distribute the ball to the Piattis and Ontivero next to him, in place of Kyle Becker, who played the same spot last Wednesday, but you have the more experience. And one thing that Patrice Bernier does that Becker tries, but not the same success rate, is holding that ball. And you want to hold the midfielder at that position to give space for a Piatti, for an Ontivero, or for your striker, either Mancosu or Drogba, to find that space and receive that service. If you have an old up type of midfielder like a Bernier was playing on Saturday, you actually get that fraction, if not that whole second more, to include the other teammates around you to push for the net. And Montreal were unlucky in that game. They could have scored 3 and 4 earlier on, but they got the equalizer late in that game.
Yeah, if you remember last season, Bernier's role for the team, obviously Biello coming in made a big difference with that. He was out of favor before that, but nonetheless. But when he started to play down the stretch, he did play a lot more down the stretch and was a very significant contributor in the playoffs.
Especially the game against Toronto, he had the 2 goals.
Yeah, he was probably the best player on the pitch, or at least the most important player on the pitch in my mind in the Toronto win. So I think that, I don't know. Like, he's a guy that it's hard to peg when his time will be done, because he loves playing the game. But
and his fitness-wise, he's as fit as anybody in this league. Like, his work ethic, his discipline, his nutrition value, whatever he does to keep his body up, he's actually holding up. He's in better shape than I've seen them. I've seen how they are, like the form, the fitness, and he has to say he is at the same level as anybody in this league because of his work rate, his discipline, and the time he puts in his lifestyle outside of the pitch.
Yeah, I would not be surprised to see him back for another year next year, because maybe with a new coach coming in with the Canadian national team, although we haven't heard that for sure yet. But maybe if that happens, he might get another look and be at the Gold Cup again. So you never know. But anyway, Patrice is an interesting cat, and one that I think will be an important player for the Impact, who will more than likely make the playoffs, but will more than likely have to win one of those play-in games at this point. So they're going to need all the veteran presence they can get.
Before we take a look at the standings in the Eastern Conference, let's talk about that 2-1 victory of Toronto against Chicago. We mentioned earlier how Chicago is a tricky team to face at the end of the season. They have a newfound confidence, a newfound way to climb up in the standings as well, having some result lately. Wins as well. They climbed. They're not the bottom of the East anymore, and they're actually in striking distance of Montreal and other teams in the 7th position if things go their way. DC is not too far away for Chicago, and if they can play spoilers, which they were close to do it against Toronto, they can be dangerous for other team in the Eastern Conference. But Toronto, a victory on the road, very important victory for Toronto.
Well, it bounced back from the loss to Montreal, which was obviously a frustrating game for all involved. Not just because it was Montreal, but because of the circumstances in which they lost it, with up a man and at home and coming off several straight, under a streak of undefeatedness. Just obviously everyone thought that they would win that. They had the Supporters Shield race in their vision for the first time ever at that day, and they dropped they weren't able to get it done. But then to come back and to get a result in Chicago, a building they had literally never won in before. Obviously with much different teams in the past, but nonetheless, they'd still never won there before. As you said, they're the Fire, but the Fire had been undefeated in 8 consecutive games at home prior to the game against TFC. So it wasn't that they were completely, it's not like they were a bunch of amateurs running around out there. They were professionals that were defending their home turf, and they got the job done nonetheless. So I thought it was they called it, like in the post game, they called it a professional win. And that's, a bit of a cliche to say it like that, but everyone kind of knows what I mean when I say that.
They got the result they needed. The way it happened doesn't necessarily matter. It's 3 points on the road. And that victory gives Toronto FC. It's hard to say, but it gives Toronto FC at the top of the East, Duane.
Yeah, by 2 points because of the results. They looked like they were going to be
one
tied.
Game in hand, too.
But they got their 2 points up down there right now with a game in hand on Dallas. They are 5 points back to the Sports Shield race. So you can start to say, because especially with 4 consecutive games at home upcoming, obviously they have to win those. If they're going to have a chance to win this Shield, they need to be nearly perfect the rest of the way. But nonetheless, we're in September, and I am talking about the Supporter Shield in Toronto FC. I'm using it in the same sentence.
You're not even using the playoff word, because let's face it, there are 12 points from the last playoff spot, which is held by Orlando now. So I think it's fair to call this right now today that Toronto FC will make the playoffs in 2016.
The magic number is actually
50, 51.
Well, it's 51 is what DC could get to, but DC and Orlando play each other twice. So
So
they will
like
take
47
could
be 47 could be the magic number.
Yeah, it's complicated, but if you do the math on it, and you break it down and what the actual total amount of points that the 6th place is, not so much what either of those teams can get to, but what the most amount of points 6th can be based on games against each other. The magic number is actually 3. So a Toronto FC win or a combination of 2 results, 2 losses by the other 2 will clinch the playoffs for it's not as simple as just saying, well, it is as simple as saying this. If Toronto wins one more game this year, they will make the playoffs.
So we're saying that 47 will be the magic number in 2016 in the Eastern Conference. So when you look at teams like Montreal with 38, they're still 3 victories away from guaranteeing a playoff spot. That's without even talking about home, away, play-in, or home field advantage. So for teams like Philly 41, Montreal 38, and Orlando 34 in 6th place, you do still have a gap in results to get to guarantee a playoff spot, because New England and DC United are both at 33 points. They're looking like the only 2 teams below that red line that could maybe make a push for that red line. Chicago 26. Yeah, they're playing better. They're on a good streak per se, but that big gap that he created by being god-awful in half of the season seems a little bit too big to bridge.
Yeah, I think that the playoffs are going to be Orlando, New England. If Montreal can get another win or 2 in the next few games, I would take them out of that. But right now, you've got to sort of put them on the periphery of that red line battle. But I think they're probably fine. I think Orlando, New England, DC are the 3 teams that will be fighting for those final playoff spots. And I have a hunch on Orlando likely getting it. that's a tough one anyway. You're talking about the 6th spot here, but there is a bit, I think, of a divide happening in the East now between the 2 New York teams in Toronto and then kind of the middle there.
And the Philly and the rest, yeah.
Philly, yeah. I think there's 3 blocks that you can look at right now in the East. You can look at the top 3, which and the points per game are pretty damn close right now, and literally 2 points apart between those 3 teams anyway. And it both literally and figuratively, as I said, points per game and actual points. I think Montreal, Philly is kind of that other middle ground there, and then the other 3 teams I just mentioned are the other ones that I think that the bottom is the bottom at this point. They started from the bottom, and they're going to stay there.
Like Toronto, they started from the bottom, now they're top.
Yeah, a long time.
Yeah, long time coming.
I suspect because at BMO Field, God love it, the people that run game day ops have always had a sense of humor about the music they play. For instance, in the first season of the year, I'm going somewhere with this, trust me. In the first season, they played "Don't Stop Believin'" after every game in the 800-minute scoreless streak, where they didn't score for 800 and some minutes. 800 and I can't believe I can't remember off the top of my head. It was like so ingrained for so long. But anyway, the long scoreless streak that Toronto had there that is the record within Major League Soccer. Like I said, they played "Don't Stop Believin'" after every game. They play the "Just Can't Get Enough" is what they play, which was kind of started as an ironic song too, that I just can't get enough, because they were giving us a lot to take at any rate. But I wouldn't shock me if at some point we started from the bottom, now we're here, makes a play if Toronto in fact does win the East. So there you go.
Exactly.
Drake, Toronto boy, there's a lot of connections there. We started from the bottom and we stayed there for a long time.
And we finally made it out. All right, that's going to wrap it up for today, Duane. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about the Champions League, because guess what restarts tomorrow, Duane?
Champions League, I'm having a laugh.
Exactly, in Europa on Thursday. So until tomorrow, 11 a.m., thanks for listening to Soccer Today. And until then, have a great soccer. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.